Have you ever noticed that the more intelligent you become, the more isolated you feel? It's a strange phenomenon. Wouldn't you agree? One might assume that intelligence would foster connection, that greater insight and understanding would draw you closer to others. But in reality, the opposite occurs. Creates a divide. You might find yourself in a social setting where everyone is laughing at a joke you don't find amusing or discussing topics that seem superficial and unimportant. You smile politely, nod along, and participate, but your mind is elsewhere. You're analyzing the deeper meaning beneath the surface conversation, identifying patterns that go unmentioned, and pondering questions that no one else seems to be asking. Suddenly, you realize you're completely alone, not necessarily in a physical sense, but in every way that truly matters. This is the unspoken price of intelligence, a cost that no one warns you about. It's the feeling of isolation that arises not simply from being different, but from perceiving the world through a unique lens. Let me share something with you about intelligent individuals, something that might shed light on why you feel the way you do. Intelligence isn't merely about accumulating knowledge. It's about heightened perception, the ability to connect seemingly disparate ideas that others overlook, and the relentless pursuit of logical conclusions, even when those conclusions are unsettling. And here lies the crux of the matter. Most people aren't willing to venture into those uncomfortable territories. They prefer not to question the established order. They want to play the game according to the rules. They don't want to examine the masks they wear. They simply want to put them on. They don't want to wonder if the emperor is actually naked. They'd rather compliment his magnificent attire. But you can't help but notice the loose threads, the inconsistencies, the contradictions, and the unspoken agreements that everyone pretends are immutable truths. And when you point these things out, even in a gentle or playful manner, it makes people uneasy. Not because you're wrong, but precisely because you're right. And being right about things that others prefer not to examine makes you seem like a threat. Consequently, people start to distance themselves. Perhaps not consciously or with malicious intent, but they do. They stop inviting you to social events, they keep conversations light and superficial around you, and they may even label you as intense, an overthinker, or overly serious. And as a result, you learn to keep your thoughts to yourself. You learn to downplay your intelligence, to speak in half-truths, to laugh at jokes you don't find funny, and to nod in agreement with opinions you don't share. You learn to hide your true self because, as you've discovered, complete honesty is a form of social suicide. Authentic expression becomes a lonely endeavor. Being truly yourself means being prepared to stand alone. And so, intelligent people often find themselves in this peculiar predicament. Surrounded by others, yet profoundly isolated. Speaking, but never truly heard. Present, but not fully engaged. It's not that you believe you're superior to anyone else. That's not the issue at all. In fact, you'd give anything to simply fit in, to care about the things that others care about, and to find meaning in the conversations they have. But you simply can't. You've seen too much, thought too deeply, and ventured too far down the rabbit hole to ever return and pretend that the surface is all there is. This is what people often misunderstand about intelligence. It's not a gift that you can simply set aside. It's not a switch that you can turn off. It's a lens through which you permanently view the world. You can't unsee patterns once you've recognized them. You can't unknow things once you've learned them. You can't revert to simple answers once you've grasped the complexity. And most people are still operating within the realm of simple answers, tidy narratives, and comfortable illusions. They accept what they're told to believe, they desire what they're told to desire, and they fear what they're told to fear, not because they're unintelligent, but because it's easier, safer, and less isolating. But you're no longer capable of doing that. And that's why you feel alone. Now, here's where things get interesting. This sense of loneliness and isolation typically unfolds in stages. And understanding these stages may help you realize that you're not broken. You're simply awake in a world that's still asleep. The first stage is characterized by confusion. You're young, perhaps, or newly aware, and you begin to notice inconsistencies. Adults say one thing but do another. Society claims to value truth, yet punishes honesty. People preach kindness but practice cruelty when they think no one is watching. And you begin to wonder, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe everyone else understands something that I don't. So you try harder. You study people, you observe their behavior, and you analyze their motivations. You try to decipher the unspoken rules of the game that everyone else seems to grasp instinctively. But the more you understand, the less sense it all makes. The rules seem arbitrary, the game appears rigged, and everyone is pretending not to notice. That's when you enter the second stage, frustration. You attempt to explain what you see. You point out the contradictions, you ask the questions that expose the illusions, and you speak the truths that everyone else is thinking but afraid to say. And you're met with resistance, denial, and even hostility. People tell you that you're overthinking, being negative, ruining the mood, or making things unnecessarily complicated. And you realize that they don't want to know. They're not curious. They're not seeking truth. They're simply seeking comfort. And your intelligence, your honesty, and your clarity threaten that comfort. So you stop sharing. You stop trying to connect. You retreat inward, which brings you to the third stage, acceptance. You accept that most people will never understand you, that your thoughts are too complex, too nuanced, and too uncomfortable for casual conversation. You accept that your depth will often be mistaken for darkness, your silence for arrogance, and your solitude for superiority. You accept that you will likely spend a significant portion of your life feeling alone. Not because there's something inherently wrong with you, but because you process the world in a fundamentally different way. And strangely, this acceptance brings a sense of peace. Not necessarily happiness, but a deep sense of inner peace. You stop expecting others to meet you where you are. You stop trying to translate yourself into simpler terms. You stop performing normalcy for an audience that will never truly appreciate you. You are simply alone, yes, but authentic. Isolated, perhaps, but integrated. Lonely, certainly, but no longer living a lie. And here's what's truly beautiful about this stage. This is where you begin to find your people. Not many of them, not often, but occasionally you encounter someone who speaks your language, who sees what you see, and who doesn't require you to explain yourself because they already understand. These connections are rare, but they're genuine. And one real connection is worth more than 1,000 superficial ones. This is the paradox of intelligent loneliness. The very thing that isolates you from the masses connects you to the few who truly matter. But let me share something else about this loneliness, something that might completely change your perspective on it. What if the loneliness you feel isn't a flaw, but a feature? What if your intelligence hasn't cursed you with isolation, but rather freed you from illusion? Think about it. Most people aren't truly connected. They're simply clustered together, huddling for warmth, but not genuinely seeing each other, not truly known. They're performing connection, playing the game of relationships, and following the script of friendship, but beneath it all, they're just as alone as you are. They're just better at pretending that they're not. You, on the other hand, have stopped pretending. You've acknowledged the truth. You are alone. We are all fundamentally born alone, we die alone, and in between we have these brief moments of recognition, these fleeting instances where another consciousness touches ours, and we feel, for a moment, less singular. But intelligent people see this clearly. They don't need the illusion of constant connection to feel okay. They don't need the noise of endless socializing to drown out the silence of existence. They can sit with themselves, think with themselves, and be with themselves and find that it's enough. This is what people misunderstand about solitude. They think it's the absence of connection, but it's not. It's the presence of self. And for intelligent people, the self is endlessly fascinating. You can spend hours in your own mind and never be bored, exploring ideas, following thoughts, building worlds of possibility, tearing them down, and rebuilding them differently. Your intelligence gives you this gift, the ability to be alone without being lonely, to be in solitude without suffering. But society doesn't celebrate this. It pathologizes it. It labels you as antisocial, isolated, or depressed. It assumes that something must be wrong with you because you're not constantly seeking external validation and stimulation. But there's nothing wrong with you. You're simply operating on a different frequency. And yes, that frequency is less crowded. Yes, fewer people can hear it. But the ones who can hear it truly hear you. Now, I want to address something important. The question you're probably asking yourself, is it worth it? Is intelligence worth the loneliness it brings? Would you trade your awareness for belonging, your clarity for comfort, your truth for togetherness? And here's what I'll tell you. You can't trade it. That's the thing. You can't unknow what you know, you can't unsee what you've seen, and you can't dumb yourself down permanently. No matter how hard you try, you can pretend. Yes, you can perform, you can code switch, mask, and play small, but inside you'll still be you, still thinking those thoughts, still seeing those patterns, still aware. And that internal dishonesty, that self-betrayal, is far lonelier than any external isolation. Because when you abandon yourself to fit in with others, you lose the only companion you're guaranteed to have for your entire life, yourself. So no, you can't trade your intelligence for belonging. But you can change your relationship with it. You can stop seeing your intelligence as a curse, stop framing your loneliness as punishment, and stop believing that something is wrong with you because you don't fit into a world that was never designed for people who think like you. Instead, you can see it for what it is, a different way of being, a different experience of life. Not better, not worse, just different. And different is always lonely. Always has been, always will be. The artist is lonely in a world of bankers, the mystic is lonely in a world of materialists, the philosopher is lonely in a world of pragmatists, and the intelligent person is lonely in a world that values agreement over truth. But here's the secret, here's what changes everything. That loneliness, that isolation you feel, isn't keeping you from life. It is life. It's the human condition laid bare. It's existence without the comforting lies we tell ourselves. Most people spend their entire lives running from this loneliness, filling every moment with noise, with people, and with distractions, anything to avoid feeling it, anything to avoid facing it. But you can't run from it. Your intelligence won't let you. It strips away the distractions, it sees through the noise, and it recognizes the loneliness as fundamental. And once you stop running from it, once you turn and face it directly, something remarkable happens. It transforms. The loneliness doesn't disappear, but it changes texture. It becomes less like a wound and more like a space, a vast open space where you can finally breathe. Because when you're no longer afraid of being alone, you're no longer afraid of anything. When you're no longer desperate for connection, you're free to connect authentically. When you're no longer performing for acceptance, you're available for recognition. This is the gift hidden inside the curse, the freedom hidden inside the isolation, and the strength hidden inside the loneliness. Intelligent people, when they embrace their solitude rather than resist it, become dangerous in the most beautiful way. Dangerous to systems that rely on conformity, dangerous to narratives that depend on unquestioning belief, and dangerous to illusions that require collective agreement. Because they're no longer playing the game, they're no longer pretending, and they're no longer available for manipulation through the fear of exclusion. They're alone, yes, but they're free. And that freedom, that sovereignty of self, is threatening to a world built on dependency and herd mentality. So yes, intelligent people are always alone. But perhaps that's not the tragedy we think it is. Perhaps it's the very thing that allows them to see clearly, to think independently, and to exist authentically. Perhaps the loneliness isn't what's wrong with them. Perhaps the loneliness is what's right. The world needs people who can stand alone, who can think for themselves, who can see through the collective delusions, and who can speak uncomfortable truths. The world needs people who aren't so desperate for belonging that they'll believe anything, support anything, and become anything just to fit in. The world needs intelligent people, even if it doesn't always appreciate them, even if it doesn't always understand them, even if it leaves them feeling alone. So, if you're one of these people, if you've felt this loneliness, let me say this to you, you're not broken, you're not defective, and you're not too much or too intense or too anything. You're awake in a sleeping world. And yes, that's lonely, but it's also necessary, it's also valuable, and it's also exactly what you're meant to be. The loneliness you feel isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something right. You're being true to yourself in a world that rewards falsehood. You're thinking for yourself in a world that demands conformity. And you're standing alone in a world that insists on crowds. And maybe, just maybe, that's not a curse at all. Maybe it's the most profound gift you could ever receive. The gift of seeing truly, thinking clearly, and being authentically, even if it means being alone, especially if it means being alone. Because in the end, the only person you need to understand you is you. And once you have that, once you accept that, and once you embrace that, you're never really alone again. You're just free.